And with that, Greg Olsen, 14 years, 3 Pro Bowls, he called the Packer route very early in the game. Things bothered you. So what did you see about the defense of Dallas that concerned you?
Yeah, so all year, it was pretty clear. They're a man preference defense. Dan Quinn wants to rush the passer. He's got a lot of nickel and dime type people. They only play with really one traditional linebacker, so it's a lot of defensive backs. They've been great against man coverage. Gilmore, Deron Bland, that's been their calling card, and they were a top 5 defense, in pretty much every single significant category. I think when you play against a Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan, McVay, that style offense with all the motions and the shifts and the movement, it's very hard to play that exclusively man. And I think going into the game, we made that point early on where he was going to have to pick and choose 12 personnel, multiple tight ends. Okay, you can man that up. But when they have all those young receivers out there and they're going in fast motion and short motions, it's very hard to match it because LaFleur does a great job putting the defense in bad situations. So I think early in the game, some of those third downs, we saw a lot of zones. Romeo Doubs just kind of wide open in the middle of the field, a lot of uncontested catches in big voids. Those were a lot of zone coverages they tried to mix in. And then as the game went on, they started transitioning back to more of, all right, we got to go back to what we're good at, go back to our man stuff. And that's where you saw the big one to Musgrave. You saw another big kind of sail route to Romeo Doubs against Gilmore. So really, whether it was zone or man, frankly, they just didn't have a lot of answers. And when they can't play with a lead and they can't force you to be a pass-first team, that is how that roster is built. I think it's important to point out in the NFL, you build your defense to complement the play style of your offense. So rightfully so, they've built a defense that rushes the passer and defends the pass. But what they don't want to defend is rundowns, under center, play action. It could be a handoff to Aaron Jones or a play action shot over my head. What they call 50-50 downs, you could do either. That is very hard to defend, and that's what Green Bay wants to do. And that was kind of our message early in the game is the better Green Bay's defense played, which they obviously played great, the more it would allow Green Bay's offense to do what they've done the last 8 games. And it lined up perfectly. And frankly, they just flat out beat Dallas in pretty much all phases.
The 2 offenses to me that were the most improved this year, Rams from week 6 on and Green Bay week 7 on. And both offensive coaches, young, smart, lot of motion. I mean, the Rams are just moving people nonstop. And so my question is watching Dallas. They don't do a lot of that. And I watch the Packers. They put such conflict on the defense. The Rams put such conflict. And I look at Mike McCarthy and I think, I know he's an offensive guy, but he's old school. Do the Cowboys need to restructure this? They feel like even Miami, they struggle with the weather, right? But at home, I watch Dallas's offense, and I can blame Dak, but when you watch it, it's not clever. It doesn't put a lot of pressure on a defense. Do they reevaluate what they present Dallas offensively?
Yeah, so twofold. To your first point about like the Shanahan, McVay, if I was a head coach in the National Football League and you didn't tell me what my roster was, you didn't tell me who my quarterback was, there's not even a question. The best system to run, especially for a young quarterback. I mean, look what Bobby Slowick's doing out in Houston with C.J. Stroud. That's the Shanahan tree. He came from San Francisco. So many of these guys, what they do to protect the quarterback, we saw yesterday with Jordan Love. Under center, play action, throw on early downs, balance run game. But everything starts with the fact that I don't put my quarterback in shotgun, 5 wide, stationary receivers and say, okay, quarterback, carry the game, right? We see Mahomes is asked to do that every single week, but he's the best player in the world. We see Josh Allen is asked to do that a little less after the coordinator change, a little more under center. My point is, it is very hard to play that style of quarterback. The fact that anybody really does it, I don't quite understand week in and week out. There's a reason certain offenses can weather the storm. They can play with young quarterbacks, play with young pieces. Yesterday being a great example. So I'll start with that. I don't know why anyone runs any other system than that tree, but that's a separate conversation. As far as Dallas, it's hard for me to sit here and say they need to revamp their offense when they just led the league in scoring, right? They led the league in scoring 2 of the last 3 years. Mike McCarthy, this is the best Dak Prescott has ever played. He took over play calling. We all kind of rolled our eyes when he got rid of Kellen Moore. I was at the top of the list. I said, man, all the guy did was average 30 points a game on offense, and you send him out the door. But Mike McCarthy was right. I mean, that's the best Dak Prescott has ever played. They were 8-0 at home, and they scored 37 points a game at home. Now, I know everyone out there saying it doesn't matter. All that matters is in the playoffs. And that's fair. And I think at a place like Dallas, that comes with the territory. But I just have a hard time saying they need to rethink their offense, revamp their offense when they scored more points this year than any team in the league. And at the end of the day, the NFL is about scoring. It's about offense. It's an offensive-driven, quarterback-driven league. And Dak Prescott played as well as any quarterback in the league from an entire season standpoint, and nobody scored more points. So it's hard for me to sit here and, CeeDee Lamb was the best wide receiver. So I don't know. I think it's kind of hard to I think it's an overreaction to yesterday to say, oh, what they do doesn't work. Well, what they do for the last 3 years has worked.
Yeah. I want to ask you, Matt LaFleur's reaction the last couple of games for Jordan Love has almost been like surprise. Like he said yesterday, it's like, that's a dude. Like, wow. And I said, I don't remember ever. I said it's like being a golfer that can't make the cut at the Valero Open to leading the Masters by a dozen strokes 3 weeks later. It's like, what are we watching? This is all in season. I mean, I watched him at home against Minnesota in like week 8, and I'm like, I don't know if he can play. What do you attribute this? I don't even know what to compare it to. What do you make of what we're watching?
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. And we had him week 1. We prepared all preseason. Obviously, it was the big storyline, him replacing Aaron Rodgers. And, we're going to get to see what this Matt LaFleur system really wants to be. And again, we can't say enough. I can't give enough credit to Matt LaFleur. The coaching job he did this year, not just offensively, but just taking this whole young group, both sides of the ball, weathering some bad storms, and just to make the playoffs felt like an accomplishment, let alone to do what they did yesterday. But with that being said, we had him week 1 in Chicago. He looked like a legit dude in week 1. Then we didn't see him again until Thanksgiving. Coming into Thanksgiving, there was some signs of improvement, starting to complete more passes downfield, starting to kind of put this whole thing together with this young group of skill players he had around him. We left that Thanksgiving Day game. We said, I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. I don't know how far they're going to make this, but that guy can flat out play. He was incredible in Detroit. They ended up winning that game.
Yeah.
Pretty dominating. It felt a little bit like yesterday. And all week we went into yesterday's game as a crew saying, this just feels like Thanksgiving all over again. The home team was the story of the league. Here comes Green Bay. Yeah, they're young, they're inexperienced, they're not ready for this moment. And then they win handily. So it had a lot of those vibes. I think part of it is the coaching, part of it's the scheme. And I think the kid's a flat out stud. I mean, he's a great player. The young kids around him have just continued to improve. It's all first and second year guys. It's a pretty remarkable story what they've been able to do in Green Bay, filling the shoes that he did of a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think we can stress enough just what a job he's done individually and then collectively as a team is really impressive.
You're a Miami Hurricane. You play down in Miami. You go up and do a road trip to Boston, Baltimore. It's a different vibe. And I said this about Tua. Listen, they can win playoff games. They just have to win their division and do a home playoff game because the AFC, Baltimore, Kansas City, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, it's just cold weather. NFC doesn't have as many. But I do worry about this is that when you have a quarterback that needs certain conditions, as long as I know, but it did feel like they were kind of protecting him. And I thought, boy, I'd struggle to give an extension to a guy that has to play in certain conditions. Where do we go with Tua? Because I like him. He's a heck of a player at home. He's smart. He's got some, accuracy-wise, when he can stand and throw it, Greg, it's Drew Brees. What do you do if you're Miami at quarterback?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, I don't think you can overreact to really an unprecedented game. And that was a historically poor weather game, the conditions. To your point, though, in the AFC, you're going to have to, for the foreseeable future,
right,
with the Burrows of the world and Lamar and Mahomes. I mean, the AFC is going to run through those cold weather cities. So to your point, I think you're exactly right. But they were a game away from that game being a home game.
Yeah.
Right. So just think the last couple weeks of the season, Buffalo doesn't lose. they kind of falter a little bit and fall off. And all of a sudden it comes down to week 18, or else they're hosting a game in 75 degrees and those northern teams are coming down. They're breathing, they can't catch their breath. They're dying on the sideline. So it works both ways at the end of the season, go into hot weather too. But listen, that was a crazy situation. And I think to overreact that all of a sudden Tua isn't the answer. Again, the question at quarterback and head coach, and I know that's the conversation. Every team that loses, the immediate emotional reaction is we need a new quarterback and we need a new head coach because I didn't like the results and the only way to get better is to change. Okay, fine. The question is, for who? Who are you getting? How are you getting them? How are you paying them? Right? There's so many more layers to the quarterback and the head coach position that change for the sake of change sounds great. It's fun to talk about. But when you boil it down, who are you getting and how are you getting them? Because if it was that easy, all these teams around the league that every year there's 8 head coaching hires and the coaching carousel that happens every single year, there wouldn't be so many coaches fired if it was easy to find the long-term stability. Right. There wouldn't be so many teams searching for quarterbacks if it was easy to get stability at the quarterback position. It's the 2 hardest positions to find in your organization, and the teams that have them and win, I think, are crazy to replace them.
Finally, Eagles have just gotten worse over the course of the season. They lost Shane Steichen. The offense is kind of a turnover-plagued mess. I'm not sure they have an identity. Can you turn it around in the playoffs? Go to your career. If you're struggling late, can you turn it around? I do think Philadelphia is better than Tampa. I think they're going to go run without A.J. Brown. I think they're going to go run heavy tonight. They may not throw 12, 15 times. Just lean on them. Can they? Can you be awful in 3 weeks and then effective? You tell me.
Well, I think Philly's a great example of our earlier conversation about play style. And when you watch Philly, and again, last year we called 1 million of their games, and they were the best story in football. I mean, they were a blast. They stand in shotgun. They're in spread. They got 1 tight end. They're wildly talented when all their pieces are out there. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. Best offensive line in football. Jalen Hurts was the runner-up to Mahomes and the MVP. When all the pieces were there together, Shane Steichen running the system, it was one of the best offenses in football. But week in, week out, year in, year out, that is a hard model to play consistently at a high level in the NFL. You put a ton of burden on your protection. You put a ton of burden on your quarterback that he has to play perfect from the pocket because he's just standing there. There's no play action. He doesn't turn his back to the defense. There's no gimmies. And then you put a ton of pressure and say, okay, yes, we are wildly talented at our skill positions. You guys have to just go win, right? We're not going to scheme Luke Musgrave open on a wheel route on a half boot and throw back and he's wide open by 40 yards. Like, you don't get a lot of the gimmies when you're just standing in shotgun spread and no one's moving and everyone. So last year they were able to do it. Their personnel is as good as anyone. This year, it's just a little bit harder to sustain. You have to be perfect. Your protection has to be perfect. Your quarterback has to be perfect. Your skill has to be healthy. It has to be perfect. So I think a big issue there in Philly is I think their players are good. I think they've had some ups and downs, weathered some injuries. I just think they're playing a very hard brand of football. Really, what saved them is that they have 2 yards in their back pocket with the quarterback sneak, that they're really at 1st and 8 every possession once they cross their own 40-yard line, because if it's anything 4th and less than 2, they get a quarterback sneak. That's really what has made their offense so hard to stop. When you look at the first 3 downs this year, it's been missing. I agree. I think they're better than Tampa. I think even though it's on the road, I don't think it matters. They're better than Tampa. They got a better – they just got to go play. And I think for a team of veterans and for a team of really high character guys, I'm a little surprised it's taken them this long towards the end of the regular season to get back on track.
Greg Olsen, great job. 14 years in the league, Fox Sports NFL analyst. Packers, Niners next week. That is going to look different. Well-rested. A lot of snaps for Green Bay. And here comes well-rested, physical San Francisco. Just your gut feeling. I kind of looked at that game and I'm like, that's not a team I'd want to face. Well-rested. That could be that's a tough matchup for Green Bay. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I thought Dallas was a better matchup for them, a little more, not quite as physical, not so much kind of down your throat, right in your face like San Francisco can be. The 2 best teams in the league are Baltimore on the AFC side and San Francisco on the NFC side. I think if the favorites continue to win, those two teams got to be the Super Bowl matchup favorites. But I don't think at this point you can count Green Bay out of anything.
That's right.
I mean, it seems like they struggle against the teams. They remember a couple weeks ago they gave up 30 points to the Panthers and almost lost.
Yes.
Carolina didn't score a point. Carolina didn't score a point the rest of the season. 0 points the rest of the season after that game. But then they beat Detroit. They beat Kansas City earlier in the year. Yesterday they boat race Dallas. So I don't think you can count this team out. I think Matt LaFleur has them playing free. They're playing with house's money. They got nothing to lose. First 7 seed to ever even play in a divisional round in the new format. I wouldn't count them out of anything, but I still think San Fran's the best team. To me, they're the favorite no matter how far this thing goes. And I think it's the matchup of the weekend. I think it's going to be awesome.
Great. God, that's a great point. Carolina never scored. I watched that game, and I was like, what is good? You know what? Young kids and young players have mood swings that are a little uneven. These young guys, they get into their feels when they play as a big favorite, and then when they're backed into the corner, they play with incredible urgency. Some of this is their youth. You don't quite know what you get.
Think about Green Bay's journey now to playing the number 1 seed San Francisco 49ers in the divisional round. Weeks 14 through 16, they lost to DeVito and the Giants. They lost to the Bucs, albeit a playoff team. And they were the Panthers clocked the ball as time expired to attempt a field goal to force overtime. They won in a shootout, both teams scoring over 30. Then they rebound and beat Minnesota and beat Chicago and hold them combined to 19 total points. So, I mean, you couldn't have two polar opposites going in, but they play well when it matters. We've seen it throughout the course of the season, especially on defense. And if that offense and Jordan Love continues to do what they've done, they're really good.
Yeah, they are. Greg, so are you. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.